Pokémon Legends Arceus. What can I really say about this game that hasn't already been said 100 times? Coming off of Sword and Shield, games that, whether you like them or not, absolutely suffered from playing it far too safe. The story, the character writing, and a lot of the gameplay mechanics felt very flat and redundant at this point. Because after 7 whole generational titles and a countless number of spin-offs, its first home console entry not feeling like a true evolution of the series' formula left the fanbase wanting a lot more. So it was a huge deal that what directly followed was... After that, though, came an incredibly ambitious title that reimagined the Pokemon formula from the ground up, had an incredible amount of depth, many ways to approach the game, one of the greatest post-games in the entire series, and is also a good game. I don't think you understand how badly the mainline series needed this. Legends Arceus is exactly the direction I want to see this series go in when it comes to the gameplay. It made strides in making the Pokemon actually feel alive, from the fact that they each have different behaviors to the different ways you're supposed to approach them. Hell, sometimes I just open the game randomly to just do nothing but run around the area, looking around, riding on Weirdeer, controlling the camera all cinematically like as if I'm in an IGN gameplay preview. Other times I just sit around friendly or neutral wild Pokemon and watch them run around me. It's a game that holds a special place in my heart and lived up to every expectation I had leading up to it. It was the happiest a game has ever made me feel on launch. But this game is far from perfect. And I don't even mean that in a graphics bad way a lot of people like to talk about the game. Like, yeah, the game looks incredibly rough around the edges, but for me that's easily forgivable if the game is fun. Which it is. But I feel like it has a lot more shortcomings than a lot of people realize, personally. Please remember this is still my favorite game in the series. First off, I felt like the story could have been a lot more interesting. I like some of the characters, especially Ingo and Volo. The ending of the base and post games are really strong. And the part where you're banished from Jubilant Village is pretty cool too. Like, it has some really good elements in it, but overall, I just wasn't that invested. I just feel like it's the weakest part of the game in my opinion, because for a lot of the game, it's just following the same exact loop of Kamado telling you to go to a new area, finding the area's warden, doing what they ask of you, then quelling the area's noble Pokemon. Outside of the positives I mentioned earlier, that's pretty much the game's plot for like 70% of the runtime. Granted, it's not like any of the previous games outside of Black and White had all that memorable of a story. But for a game as different as this, I just wish it did more personally. Next is one that I doubt a lot of people really complain about, and that's the Pokemon's overworld attacks. It's where the more aggressive wild Pokemon will spot you and just start throwing anything they got at you. It's a great concept, and the way it is executed is far from being actually bad. I just think it's lacking a little. The amount of moves at their disposal could have been at least a little larger, especially for the Alpha Pokemon. The amount of times to see an Alpha Pokemon spam a single move in the overworld is a little disappointing, seeing how they're supposed to be the single most threatening things in the entire region. But they don't come off as threatening. They come off as Calyrex users. This also applies to some of the noble Pokemon boss fights. The noble Pokemon boss fights in question is specifically Cleavers. It does nothing but spam that one charge move, and you have to put in actual effort in order to get it to do anything else. The other fights, thankfully, aren't nearly as redundant and have variety to them, so it's not too big of a deal. This whole thing isn't too big of a deal, if I'm being honest. It's just something I would wish to see expanded upon. And lastly... yeah, this game is really ugly. Not saying it doesn't have at least very specific areas that I think are decent looking, because it does. But there's a lot of areas that look like they have either nothing going on, or random stuff just thrown in to fill what would otherwise be an empty spot of land. There's also these very specific trees that show up almost everywhere, and they literally look like an accident. It looks like some glitched out mess that unintentionally seeped through into the final build. And what makes it weirder is that a lot of the other trees in the game look fine. Not perfect, far from it, but sometimes seeing them in a collective is kinda nice looking, which is how I would also describe the best looking areas of the game. Not perfect, but as a collective of everything going on, not bad. Now I know what you might be thinking. Is this guy stupid or something? This is not the same game you promised to be talking about. Well, the reason I brought up Z-A's predecessor was not only to bring up its strengths and weaknesses, but also to show why and how Z-A could outdo it in almost every way. The long time spent in the dark on this game honestly made me 10 times more excited for it, to the point where it is now my most anticipated game of 2025. Right behind Monster Hunter Wilds, but I don't think anything has a chance of topping that. Either way, I am very excited to show you exactly why this game is one of my most anticipated games of 2025. But I know what else you might be thinking. Yeah, this game has no trailers. After the debut trailer, there has not been a single ounce of information regarding Z-A. But trust me, this is a good thing. Legends Arceus came out sandwiched between BDSP and Scarlet and Violet. These developers need all the breathing room they can get. And you know, we also didn't need the 3 releases in a span of a full year, but whatever, I guess. But the fact that it's been 3 years since Legends Arceus' release and we still haven't had anything official come out, I think that means we are looking at a fall release time at the very least. Which compared to Legends Arceus' development time would be a nearly year-long extension when it comes to the release timing. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like I know anything about game development, nor do I know anything about Game Freak's development in particular. But I remember when the chief operating officer of the Pokemon Company made that statement a while ago on how they're focusing on more high-quality products, but still keeping the current schedule cycle. No one liked that statement. Yeah, this made a lot of people not have much faith in Pokemon going forward, and it's not hard to see why. And I was one of those people. I never liked the fact that they took only 3 years to develop these home console games. But now that 2024 is over, I think it's easier to see what they actually meant. The schedule that they brought up wasn't about the 3-year development time thing I was talking about. It was instead about the 1 game a year thing, which people don't really like. And like I said earlier, they literally released 3 games in the span of a single year, so they haven't even been following that to begin with. But then TCG Pocket came out, a mobile app meant to be nothing more than just a card collecting game. And that was the only release of 2024 for them, a mobile card app. It made me look at that statement that they made before a little differently. Like, yeah, they're still doing that 1 game a year thing, but that game can just be a mobile card app and nothing else for the rest of the year. And that's what 2024 was. And since nothing else was announced after the Pokemon Presents of 2024, something tells me that Generation 10 is going to wait until 2026, and 2025 is just going to be Z-A. So not only will Z-A get at the very least 10 months of extra development, but Generation 10 will get an entire year of extra development. Maybe, hopefully. This is just me going off of the silence around Z-A and what happened in 2024, so take this with a grain of salt. So I obviously think the game is going to be released in fall of 2025. Cool. But I also have some thoughts on what the game actually might be like, and I want to start that off talking about the initial reveal trailer. The teaser opens up with this shot of a file marked confidential. Inside is another file with the title Urban Redevelopment Plan, Lumio City, with tape covering the Lumio City part because it wants to be a surprise. I think this opening does a really good job at showing the difference in tone between Arceus and this game. With Arceus, its reveal trailer begins with the opening of a book and quiet narration telling the tale of the setting of the game you're about to see. With Z-A, it opens with the file documents detailing the city's redevelopment, and instead of there being narration of any kind, it is backed by this interpretive jazz-sounding track. Even if Z-A's doesn't show any gameplay, I really like how these reveal trailers introduce you to the game's world. And there's even a good chance it wasn't even intentional, but I think it's a good way to keep introducing you back to these types of games. Hopefully they keep doing it, cause if not, this is gonna look really dumb. The rest of the trailer takes place in this blueprint style look of Lumios with appearance of Gen 6 Pokemon everywhere. It's all structured to have you constantly guessing and being drip-fed clues as to what you are watching. All leading up to the big reveal, which is the title, revealing not only that it's a Legends game, but that it's Z. More on that later. There's also the reveal that Megas are returning, but for me, I think the title drop of all things got me the most excited. Because not only does it mean that the Legend series wasn't just a one-time thing, but that these games can also surround legendaries and not just mythicals. Overall, as a teaser trailer, it does a lot without revealing much at all. Most of the information we know of the game comes from the official social media accounts. For example, it was revealed on the official Nintendo Twitter account that the entirety of the game takes place within Lumio City, and you heard me correct, I said the entirety. Think GTA, Spider-Man, Yakuza. Being an open-ended game that takes place in just one city isn't a new concept in general, but it is for Pokemon in particular. Like when I think of Pokemon areas, I think of big grassy fields. Even in the earlier games, a lot of the routes are exactly that. The setting opens up so many possibilities on how and where to locate wild Pokemon, or what specific areas in the cities hold what, or how many buildings can be explored top to bottom. It's overwhelming to think about. A concept I would love to see explored with this setting are big city parks. For example, Central Park in New York. A big grassy field with forests, but still has that urban feeling to it. I honestly think it's such a fun idea to have the grassy areas, the setting Pokemon usually takes place in, to have the least amount of land in the game's map compared to the city itself. This setting alone has the potential to make this game feel like nothing that we've ever experienced before in Pokemon. For another topic, I want to talk about a certain word they use to describe the game, and that's ambitious. You might be a little confused as to why I'm pinpointing them using this one word to describe the game, because games like Scarlet and Violet and especially Legends Arceus were very ambitious titles during a point where Pokemon was feeling very stale. But that's the thing, these games were never described as ambitious by official accounts. In fact, this is literally the first time the official Pokemon Twitter has ever used that word. To me, this could mean that they are aiming to outdo what Scarlet and Violet and even what Arceus accomplished. Now the question is, how can the game earn the title of ambitious? It's kinda impossible to tell right now given how little we actually know of the game, because while the entire game taking place in a giant city is definitely ambitious for Pokemon standards, that's most likely not even scratching the surface of what makes this game out of all of them earn this title. But I do have an idea of one thing that would make this game ambitious. A mechanic that would flip the formula that we've known for almost 30 years now on its head. And for me, that would be real-time battling. Now hear me out! Legends Arceus already changed the battle systems in a few ways to make it stand out from the main generational titles. For example, the fact that you can meddle with the turn order itself, and the two new move styles. I think the way the turn order works and how you're able to freely roam the battlefields during combat is as close to real-time battles that Pokemon has ever gotten. Which is why I believe the successor fully embracing the concept isn't far out there. And there is a ton of ways they could possibly execute it. Like for example, they could execute it similarly to how some of the more recent Final Fantasy games approach combat and spells, with an active time battle gauge, ATB gauge for short. So imagine throwing the Pokemon of your choice and the action of the battle immediately starting. The two Pokemon automatically throw basic attacks at each other all while your ATB gauge fills up. Once the gauge fills a certain threshold, you press a button to bring up a menu of the 4 moves you can currently throw out by spending a bar of the gauge. There's also the possibility of the wild Pokemon throwing out moves and attacks towards you during battle to keep you on your toes. You have that dodge for a reason after all. I can only really see something like this happening only for wild Pokemon battles though. I view trainer battles to be a lot more of a take your time and plan your move out sort of thing, rather than something requiring actual reflexes and proper timing. And like I said, that's just one of the many ways to approach real-time Pokemon battling. But there's even more possibilities that can make the concept of real-time battling more interesting outside of how the actual combat itself would work. Like imagine if you wanted to catch the Pokemon you are currently fighting. Instead of pulling up a menu to automatically throw the Pokeball at the target, you have to actively aim the Pokeball at the Pokemon that's currently fighting you. Like I said before, I am not a game developer, so there's a very good chance that executing real-time battles like this would just not be that fun. Hell, there's a good chance that if a battle system exactly like this were to be implemented, it could just outright suck. But it's at least a very interesting idea that I think would make this game easily earn the title of ambitious more than anything. For me at least. Next thing I want to discuss is the inclusion of Mega Evolution. Megas have always been heavily requested to one day come back, so this last second reveal in the trailer teasing its return made a lot of fans happy. It is one of the most beloved mechanics that a lot of people hold as the greatest Pokemon gimmick of all time. I'm not one of those people. Yeah, I never really jived with how it encourages to use the very specific Pokemon that is able to be Mega Evolved because it's just a win button as long as you aren't Garchomp. It's also a problem I have with Gigantamaxing, because while you can Dynamax with any Pokemon in Sword and Shield, having it so that you can only use specific Pokemon that change forms with G-Maxing makes you almost always want to Dynamax that Pokemon instead of any other options. This is why Terastallizing is my personal favorite gimmick. Not only can it be used on literally anything and everything, but it incentivizes creative uses of the gimmick rather than just using the gimmick on the Pokemon that benefits the most from it. It also just has a lot of skill expression to it, and I absolutely adore it for that. Now, you may have noticed that I've only been talking about this gimmick in a more competitive sense, because that's the reason why I personally dislike Mega Evolution as a competitive gimmick. Not only is Z-A most likely not going to have any online battling, but the Legend series seems to be prioritizing being a single-player experience first and foremost. So a lot of my issues with Megas are kinda just gone. Not all though, I'm still not a fan of the selection X and Y had for the Megas. And while Oraz for sure improved it, I really hope Z-A makes the roster of Megas a little more interesting for me. I also hope they expand on the concept of Mega Evolutions when it comes to the story. How forcing Pokemon to push past their limits can be seen as a terrible thing, and how certain Megas are literally in pain from going too far. I would love to see this expanded on more, especially given the fact that X and Y didn't bother to, which also applies to most concepts X and Y tried to tackle. So yeah, I'm completely down for the inclusion of Mega Evolutions in this game. I think it can make a single-player adventure like the Legends game even more interesting. But there is one more thing about this game I need to talk about, because to me, it is one of the biggest things that makes this game have as much potential as it does. And that's Zygarde. Even though the story of Pokemon Z is somewhat common knowledge, I'ma still go through it for those who don't know. So in X and Y, there's this area by the name of Terminus Cave that you can access quite early on. But it's only after you defeat the Elite Four and become champion where you unlock this hidden area that was previously blocked off by an elite trainer. You head deeper in, and then you find it. Why is its head that big? It's nothing new for a third legendary to just be located in some random cave in the first version of a game. Look at Giratina in the original Diamond Pearl games, for example. It's kind of a classic Pokemon staple to have the third legendary be some hidden and nearly random inclusion in a game, but that's what the third versions are here for. Games like Pokemon Platinum, Emerald, maybe Crystal, I haven't played that one yet. These games all shed more light on the third legendaries of their respective regions, so it's not a real stretch to assume Pokemon Z would follow up X and Y, right? I mean, it makes the most sense if you think about it. Xerneas and Yveltal represents the letters X and Y in multiple ways, and now here we have a Pokemon that entirely represents the letter Z. I still don't understand Gen 6's theme. Hell, the Kalos anime was literally titled XYZ! And guess who's in it? It was inevitable at this point. And wouldn't you know it, Pokemon had a very special announcement at that time. On Pokemon Day 2016, they announced their next title, Pokemon Sun and what in the goddamn... In one of the most infamous turns of events, Z never actually happened. They just completely skipped X and Y getting a third version in favor of just moving on to Gen 7. And if that wasn't confusing enough, they announced Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which are two separate third versions for Gen 7. What is going on here? But that isn't even scratching the surface, because Sun and Moon had exclusive content revolving around Zygarde. In the games, there's these hidden collectibles around the islands called Zygarde cells. If you collect enough, you can start putting together different percent forms of Zygarde. There's the 10% form, then the X and Y form renamed to 50% form, and then the complete form. Genuinely one of the coolest legendary designs in the entire series in my opinion. And I love the concept of collecting these cells that all collectively form this giant titan. which makes it all the more disappointing that they just hand it to you. There's little to no fanfare, no battle to tame it or showcase its abilities. It all just makes me question what the point of its inclusion even was. And in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, you just find it sitting in another cave to reference its appearance in X and Y, so it's just more nothing. Because of these Zygarde appearances, it was theorized that Pokemon Z was in production or meant to release at some point in time, but instead was scrapped for an unknown reason, and some mechanics, like the cell hunting, was instead put into Sun and Moon. Then, Sword and Shield came around, and announced that they were going to be doing DLC expansions instead of third versions going forward. It's so you can access the new content of the versions immediately instead of going through the same game paying full price again. I think it's a great change, but it buried the Pokemon Z dream even more. Is that it? Is Zygarde just gonna stay completely irrelevant and unknown legendary with hardly anything really surrounding it? Sure, it had a special fight in the Crown Tundra DLC that was pretty hard, but that was about it when it came to its relevance. That is, until February of last year. The 1-2 punch of the Legends fade-in and the title Z shocked everyone. And I mean everyone.
Pokemon Z! Wait! Pokemon Z actually happened! Pokemon Legends! Let's go! Yeah! Let's go!
Pokemon Legends Kalos? Z! Oh my gosh!
Pokemon Legends!
Ah! Z!
Oh, it's Legends!
Oh. Okay. Cool, I guess.
It was an unbelievable moment, to put it lightly. A game everyone thought was legitimately dead, coming back an entire decade later under the brand new Legends format that everyone loves. It has a longer development time than Arceus? I've seen people who don't even like modern Pokemon turn their heads at this announcement. Obviously, the game is going to be a lot more than just Pokemon Z but Legend style because of the -A part of the title and everything else I mentioned earlier. But even then, Zygarde is finally getting the game it always deserved. And I don't think I can even put into words how happy I am that it finally happened. One of my favorite parts of Legends Arceus was Arceus himself. I always thought when it came to the games, he could definitely be a lot more exciting. And it's not even because of the fact that his event was impossible to access for the longest time. I just felt like, as the literal god of the entire Pokemon universe, he could have more to do in the games. And I think Legends Arceus did him perfectly. Even though he doesn't actually appear for a majority of the game, I love how they make him seem like the god that he is while keeping him so mysterious. His boss fight is amazing. The difficulty and spectacle is exactly everything I wished for going into it, but none of it compares to the lore that the game drops afterwards. In the game, there are these research tasks for every Pokemon in the region. Completing the tasks level up their dex entry once or twice. It's all to simulate the feeling of creating the very first Pokedex of the region, and I think it's really cool. But for Arceus, he only has one task, and that's catching it once. But the difference is, it reads, "Received a part of Arceus." It suggests that this form that we've known since 2007 is not even a fraction of what Arceus actually is. It has been joked about for as long as I can remember about being able to catch God in these games, and questioning if the 10-year-old child you play as can commit literal universe-changing abilities because of it. But this completely deconfirms that. The real Arceus that actually created the entire universe is something we have never seen, and most likely will never see. Arceus' involvement in his own game may not seem that big on paper, but it is exactly what I hoped for. And it's exactly why I cannot wait to see how they handle Zygarde. So yeah, Z-A is absolutely beaming with potential, and I hope I shed some light as to why I'm so excited for it. And I didn't even touch everything there is that this game could expand on. There's Team Flare's origin, the ancestor of X and Y's cast. Literally anything about Az, I just want more Az. And as I mentioned before, this game can easily fix the issues and nitpicks I have with Legends Arceus. Like for example, the problem I had with the tiny moveless Pokemon have in the overworld can easily be expanded on if they just include the moves they already created and just make more. And this goes for the noble boss fights if they decide to bring them back. Please bring them back. Please bring them back. For the story issues I had, Pokemon has kind of been on a hot streak when it comes to the story in Scarlet and Violet and its DLC. Both having incredibly memorable characters and very emotional highs, it's the aspect of Scarlet and Violet I assume not a lot of people can argue is one of its strongest elements in a very divisive game. So I can easily see Z-A having a better story overall, if they keep the writing team. Then there's the graphics, which honestly is up in the air whether it will actually be improved on or not. The extra development time could make the game end up with at the very least somewhat improved visuals, but with that said, I am far from being someone who has a majority of a game's enjoyment come from graphical fidelity or visual flair. I can easily love a game even if I dislike how it looks. I really like both Scarlet and Legends Arceus, and I have a ton of issues with both of those games' visuals. If a game is visually striking, yeah, I'll take it in and gush about it all I want, but it's not a deal breaker or anything. So if Z-A ends up having similar visual issues, it would be a shame for sure, but I won't be all that torn up about it personally. Alright, so this is postscript Mari here. Hello. I don't know if you heard about this recent event that just happened, but the Switch 2 just got revealed. I didn't write anything about this in the script for some reason, so I just want to say I think it would be really cool if Z-A was on the Switch in any capacity, even if it's made to be on Switch 1 and it's just a cross-gen game that has somewhat better performance and somewhat better looks and resolution. I would totally be down for that. I'm very excited for the Switch 2. I'm definitely looking to upgrade. That's all I really wanted to say. So yeah, enjoy the rest of the video. And so, other than that, I don't know, give the game an actual stamina meter. But yeah, I'm really excited for this game. I doubt it will be too much longer before they show its first gameplay trailer, and you better believe I'm gonna be there the second it happens. I love Pokemon with all my heart to the point where it's not an exaggeration to call it my favorite series of all time. I don't love every game that comes from it, but man, nothing comes even close to match my enjoyment of these stupid little creatures. I don't really find the same enjoyment in a majority of games like I do with Pokemon, so to see them really push past the standard formula and continue to keep pushing it with each entry, it makes me really happy. Legends Arceus was the Pokemon game I've always dreamed of growing up. I always imagined a game where the line between the adventuring aspect and the Pokemon battle aspect grew thinner and thinner. And the simple change of real-time catching and the incredibly quick-paced battle system was enough for this game to fulfill those fantasies I used to have. I have complete faith that Z-A will be the follow-up that everyone hopes it will be and more. And what that will look like? Well, we can only wait and see. But for now, all I have to say are two final things. See y'all on February 27th. And lastly, please for the love of God be actually good.
Oh yeah, they could add voice acting too, I guess.